May 16th, 2024 meeting of the Safca Board of Directors. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Director Desmond. Director Frost. Director Hume.
Here.
Chairman Kennedy.
Here.
Director Cerna. Here. Director Jennings. Here. Director Kaplan. Here. Director Talamentes. Director Holloway. Present. Director Johns. Here. Director Avdis. Here. Director Lee Reeder. Here. Thank you. We do have a quorum.
Please read the announcement.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting of Safca is being broadcast live on metro14live.saccounty.gov and will be recorded and re-aired on Sunday, May 19th at 12 p.m. and will be available on Safca's website within 48 hours after the meeting. Members of the audience who wish to address the board should fill out a speaker form located here on the lectern and bring it to me. When addressing the board, please identify yourself for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item, please.
Our first item is a separate matters information. It's an update on YOLO bypass activities.
Good afternoon.
Got it. Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Kennedy and members of the board. My name is Melanie Saucier, and I'm with Safca. I'm a principal planner. Today, we're going to give you guys a short update on the YOLO bypass activities. Lindy, if you could go back to the first slide. And we have a couple speakers here today with us. From the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, we have Ruth Darling. And the next slide, Lindy, please. And then we also have from DWR, Mary Jimenez.
I don't have control
No
of
worries.
Melanie.
And we just want to come today to kind of talk broadly about what's happening in the YOLO bypass, some of the activities, both federal, state, and local planning efforts. So you're going to hear from all three of us today, and then we'll conclude a little bit later in the comprehensive study that the Corps has kicked off and give you guys a bit of an update on that process. So to provide a little bit of planning context and some of the alignment, the state and the federal government and Safca through a DWR grant have several planning activities going on in the region. We're really taking a strategic approach all the way from comprehensive planning down to regional and statewide planning efforts, and then location-specific focusing on the upper YOLO bypass. So we'll talk a little bit about all three of these activities today, and you'll hear a little update about what has been going on over the last year and will continue over the next several years. So I'm going to turn it over to Ruth to start the presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Kennedy, members of the board. My name is Ruth Darling. I'm a planner with the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. And the Central Valley Flood Protection Board is also the non-federal sponsor, along with Safca, for the federal comprehensive study you'll hear about later. So just to provide an update on the YOLO Bypass Cash Slough Partnership, which Safca is a member of. The YOLO Bypass is a feature of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project and is part of a complex hydrologically interconnected flood management system consisting of reservoirs, rivers, sloughs, bypasses, and structures and levees. The YOLO Bypass Cash Slough region is a microcosm of challenges and opportunities. It is a diverse collection of federal, state, and local interests. And the YOLO Bypass Cash Slough Partnership is a novel effort developed to develop an integrated landscape with local, state, and federal interests considered and advanced together. So this slide depicts the agencies that are members of the YOLO Bypass Cash Slough Partnership. In May of 2016, 15 federal, state, and local agencies signed the YOLO Bypass Cash Slough Memorandum of Understanding. This was spearheaded by the California Natural Resources Agency. And the intent of the MOU was to improve collaboration, to overcome implementation barriers, synchronize efforts, and enhance outcomes of planning efforts within the region. The signatory agencies recognized that analysis was needed on the wide variety of proposed projects to consider implementation at a landscape level in a coordinated and sequenced way to ensure success for all. The partnership has developed a vision document. The intent of the partnership is that local, state, and federal agency members of the partnership, working closely with other agencies, interested parties, Native American tribes, are jointly planning and implementing projects capable of delivering multiple benefits across a shared landscape. And on the right, you'll see what the partnership refers to as its planning pillars. So flood, habitat, water supply, agriculture, recreation, and water quality. These are all central to the collaborative planning for a vibrant future for the region's residents, businesses, and ecosystem. Further, the partnership is committed to making diversity, equity, and inclusion central to its efforts to accrue benefits across these 6 pillars. And I think it's important to note, I'm sure you're mostly familiar with the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan and its 5-year updates. So the 2022 Central Valley Flood Protection Plan identified policy issues. And these 6 policy issues that you see on your slide through the Yellow Bypass Cash Slough Partnership, the Yellow Bypass Cash Slough Master Plan, and the comprehensive study, which you'll hear about later in the presentation, are all implementing these policy issues and trying to get at overcoming the struggle surrounding implementing these policy issues. So with flood and ecosystem performance accounting, I'll just give you a couple of examples. DWR and the Flood Board are developing the Yellow Bypass Cash Slough Master Plan to enable a programmatic approach to implement multi-benefit improvements within the Yellow Bypass. For coordination with federal agencies, we're all working with the Army Corps of Engineers on the Yellow Bypass comprehensive study. The governance and institutional support, so the partnership is a collaboration of 15 state, federal, and local agencies that have developed a governance framework for how it operates, as well as a vision document and several deliverables to help advance the vision of the Yellow Bypass Cash Slough Partnership. And recent partnership activities, so we did have an executive committee meeting in 2022. During that executive committee meeting, we did hear from executives that the vision document should include references to climate change as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion. The vision document was revised to include some of the recommendations from the executive committee. We did revise our governance framework to address some of the feedback we heard at that executive committee meeting as well. We've been working on the master plan administrative draft and appendices. And also in the last year, since we've signed the feasibility cost sharing agreement with the Army Corps on the comprehensive study, we're working to advance the scope, schedule, and budget of that comprehensive study. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mary Jimenez to discuss the master plan.
Thank you, Ruth. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Jimenez. I'm a principal engineer with the Department of Water Resources. Thank you again for having us this afternoon. I'll provide a brief update and an overview of the Yellow Bypass Cash Slough Master Plan that is underway by DWR and the Flood Board through a collaborative effort. So the Yellow Bypass Cash Slough Master Plan is being developed as a programmatic framework for multi-benefit activities in the Yellow Bypass Cash Slough region. Its primary purpose is to guide continued project planning and implementation consistent with the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan and Conservation Strategy, as Ruth Darling mentioned. It is also a key piece in setting up information to inform the Corps of Engineers comprehensive study that you will hear about later in the presentation today. As a master plan for the region, it is a non-regulatory document and also includes a path forward to achieve the Yellow Bypass Cash Slough's partnership vision in the region. The administrative draft was produced at the end of 2023 and released to representatives of our Yellow Bypass Cash Slough partnership agencies and representatives of interested Native American tribes. That administrative draft is organized into 4 chapters, plus references and a suite of appendices. As of now, in May 2024, we are into evaluating and getting ready to address the suite of comments that we addressed through collaborative discussions with our partners. And so the communications and engagement effort associated with continuing to develop this Yellow Bypass Cash Loop Master Plan from an administrative draft moving forward. As I mentioned, we received a number of comments on that administrative draft. We are working through grouping them into themes and ways to address them, and we're preparing to conduct facilitated working sessions with the reviewers of that administrative draft. We are also continuing, as we're planning these facilitated working sessions in June, to offer up continued offers of engagement with representatives of agencies and others that are interested in this vibrant region. And then we're working to further coordinate with our partners, including Safca and the Flood Board here today, to align and leverage our efforts, and also with the Corps of Engineers as well. And so this just then provides an overview of our schedule. As I mentioned, we set out an administrative draft for review by our partners at the end of last year. We plan to continue to work through the facilitated working sessions and then reconciling, editing, and continuing to work on the document through the summer, all with the intent of releasing a public draft in the fall. So it would be a public draft of the master plan document itself, the appendices, and a program environmental impact report. I wanted to mention that the partnership between DWR and the Flood Board in this effort, the Central Valley Flood Protection Board is the California Environmental Quality Act lead for the program EIR, and DWR and my team, we are the lead for the master plan itself. So after public review in the fall, of course, we plan to work through the public comments that we're going to receive and work towards a final version targeted currently for the end of the year. And with that, I'll hand over back to Melanie. Thank you.
Okay, Melanie Saucier again with Safca. So I'm going to do a little bit of a background on the Upper Yellow Bypass planning process. So this is focused specifically just on the upper portion of the bypass. Safca received a grant and a funding agreement with DWR back in May of 2023 to partner in this process. And really what we're looking to do is planning and projects that would improve flood risk management, agriculture, habitat, water supply, and water quality and recreation just in that portion from Fremont Weir to the I-80 bridge and Upper Yellow Bypass. 2 things that we're really looking to get out of this process are coordination with our local agencies, our landowners, and interested parties in the region to document what their local preferences are. So what projects and measures do they want to see in the region, along with some of the features that are being considered in these other bigger planning efforts like the state's master plan or the federal comp study. The other piece of this is that we are creating an associated Upper Yellow Bypass plan that captures those alternatives and that feedback that we received from locals and landowners in the region to feed that into the comprehensive study with the Corps. So that process is well underway, and I'll give you guys a little bit of an overview today. So like I said, we're focused just on the Upper Yellow Bypass. It's about 6,900 acres, primarily in agriculture. There's 20 plus landowners with varying sizes of parcels in the region, and tenant farmers, and about 20 homes or farm structures. There's 5 conservation easements and currently 2 mitigation banks in this footprint, one for Valley Elderberry Longhorn Beetle and one for 404 wetlands mitigation. The second feature that's really a large part of our planning effort is 11.5 miles of the Tule Canal. It covers this area as well, and you can see that in the blue line in the map here. So for this process, we created a steering committee. You can see the representation here, DWR, the Central Valley Flood Board, our Yolo County representative, RD 1600, Safca, and a consultant support team. The steering committee has been vital to helping us think through the process, make sure we're doing outreach and engagement and reaching the target audience and interested parties, and kind of giving us feedback along the way about our talking points, our messaging, and how we're considering alternatives. So just a quick look at some of the interested parties we have met with to date. Yolo County, different RDs in the region, land trusts, NGOs, City of Woodland, tenant farmers and local landowners, and Yolo Flood Control and Water District. So this represents a pretty broad set of members and interested parties that we've met with in the region. We definitely haven't reached everyone. We're still continuing to do outreach as we move through this process. And a quick look at the outreach and engagement that we have done to date. We've had 7 steering committee meetings, 21 meetings with those interested parties in that previous slide. We've given a presentation to the Central Valley Flood Protection Board and a workshop. And then we did have 2 workshops in the region, one hosted by Yolo County and one hosted by RD 1600. We've been sending mailers and contacting through our Yolo County representative, through farmers, lessees, wildlife area managers, and environmental nonprofits who were invited to participate. So a little bit about the process. This slide looks complicated, but I'll try and walk through it. Really the first step in this was to leverage existing information and data. So working with data that's been done through the Central Valley Flood Protection Board and the master plan to gather all of that existing information and compile it. Working with interested parties and doing the initial engagement, creating a set of goals and objectives with our local landowners and county participants. And then really what that fed into is that local preferences memo. So that memo has helped us identify problems, opportunities, and constraints that they want to be considered in the region and develop and assess potential solutions. So that set of solutions or alternatives, I'll talk a little bit about on the next slide. So where we are in this process is in between screening and prioritizing solutions and then grouping those into alternatives. Those alternatives will then feed into the Upper Yolo Bypass Plan, and some of those alternatives will be suitable for consideration for federal investment in the Corps' comprehensive study. So that is also helping us feed into that study and make sure non-federal sponsor preferences and local landowner and county preferences are incorporated into that. The Corps will do its own process, which I'll talk about at the end, and they will determine federal interests, and if not, there may be other avenues for support for some of these projects and measures through non-federal sponsor. So the first piece of this is we've drafted a local preferences memo that documents all the outreach and feedback we've heard to date. We did get a lot of questions and concerns and considerations that we should be thinking about during this planning process about flood control alternatives in the region and about options for improvements to Tule Canal. We've also heard a good bit about considering activities not just in the region of the Upper Yolo Bypass, but also in adjacent areas, that there could be improvements that are beneficial outside of the bypass that we should consider. And this document has been reviewed by the RD 1600 board, Yolo County, and several landowners. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but just a summary of some of the planning constraints we have heard. We've been, trying to really capture these so we can think about how to avoid or minimize some of these issues in the process. Disturbance to those habitat mitigation areas, unacceptable hydraulic impacts, impacts to RD 1600 O&M revenue, and impacts to agricultural conservation easements. Some of these things may be very challenging to avoid, but this is part of the process of helping us collect that interested party feedback and what sort of planning considerations we should also be relaying to the Corps as part of the comprehensive study. So we also heard from the local preferences memo several requested activities and measures from that feedback. We did get several different projects, which are on-the-ground modifications that folks would like us to consider, 22 of those, and 4 different actions which were more non-structural in nature. One of them, for example, was a Tule Canal O&M maintenance plan and consideration of how we can improve some of the O&M for Tule Canal. So real quick, this slide also is a little complicated, but we're trying to document here where this process fits with the Corps' comprehensive study process. So in the blue box at the top, you'll see where we are in this process. We're currently in that June timeframe preparing our alternatives and our draft plan for review. We will need to submit alternatives as part of that plan for consideration to the Corps in the fall. and then walk through the CORE's process in green on the bottom. The alternative milestone meeting just occurred a few weeks ago on May 10th, and then the CORE's process is a bit lengthier, so it goes through 2026 for a tentatively selected plan, and all the way until March 2029 for a chief's report. So there is a bit longer of a lead time to work through that comprehensive study, but this process is really helping us get ahead of that and making sure that we're documenting feedback and incorporating the feedback of everyone before the CORE starts their process. So some of our next steps, we're continuing to do outreach. We are meeting with additional landowners, the Farm Bureau, and Yolo County Board of Supervisors. We are going to finish drafting that Upper Yolo Bypass plan and continue coordination with the CORE on the comprehensive study. This is definitely helping us inform that study and already has been through the scoping process. So the CORE has already been using some of the existing data and analysis, and will continue to do that every step along the way. So I'll pause real quick there, and then I will talk about the comprehensive study.
Go ahead and start the comprehensive study.
Okay.
I see no one punched in at this time.
Okay, so the comprehensive study originated from the Water Resources Development Act in 2020. That act authorized a comprehensive study for the region that included system-wide analysis of the Yolo Bypass, multi-purpose and system-wide federal project planning and resiliency considerations, and site-specific projects that may be identified for federal interest. Our non-federal sponsor role collectively, Safca, the Central Valley Flood Board, and DWR, is to share technical information and knowledge of the region, potential projects, and use that close collaboration as part of the previous effort I just explained to provide input on the non-federal sponsors' preferred alternatives. So this study has done a few things so far. It kicked off several months ago and has explored existing conditions. So the CORE has set out to kind of set the stage for the existing conditions of the Yolo Bypass. I'm not going to go through all of these here, but this is a really good summary of what has been put together to date. You can see that there's a potential to reduce risk to up to 950,000 people and $150 billion in critical infrastructure in the region. Those numbers have gone up since the previous efforts, so that's definitely something to note. And then also the agricultural economy. There is a big set of acreage that is specific to agriculture in the region that should be considered. Water supply delivery system, providing drinking water to 25 million Californians and irrigating 4.5 million acres of ag land. And then there's a lot of recreation and historic and cultural significance in the region. As part of this effort, the CORE and the non-federal sponsor team has identified several problems, opportunities, and constraints. So we're well aware of the risk of flooding. There's also a restricted fish passage issue that can be addressed through this study, tribal access to culturally important land, drought and water supply reliability, water quality, and lack of shaded riparian vegetation. Some of the opportunities that the CORE is looking at is improving socioeconomic conditions through flood risk management improvements, improving riparian and aquatic habitat, enhancing public awareness, considering multi-benefit features, and traditional planting palettes for cultural. So there are 6 objectives for the comprehensive study. Very similar to what was just described, that first objective is to reduce flood risks, life safety to property and critical infrastructure. The second is to improve ecological function of riparian and wetland habitats. The third is enhancing fish ecology by improving access to floodplain habitat and reducing fish strandings. And then the fourth is objectives for how to improve opportunities for recreational and tribal access. And then increasing sustainability and resiliency of the flood risk management system, and then finally improving the quality of recreation and educational opportunities. So the comprehensive study approach, based on the study-specific guidance that the CORE was delivered from headquarters and the vertical team, they are taking a 2-step approach to this, both a combination of a comprehensive level approach, which is a comprehensive management plan, that is intended to look at more system-wide programmatic strategies, not necessarily site-specific features or projects. And that is going to be developed in a lot of guidance with the non-federal sponsor team. I think in the most part, we will be taking the lead on a lot of that, putting together that comprehensive management plan, using existing data and information from the state, and including some of the bigger picture items such as O&M, monitoring, and pilot projects for additional studies in the region. The second piece of that is a traditional feasibility level approach. So that will include new features, improvements to structural or operational modifications of existing features, and it'll include comprehensive benefits, which the Corps is kind of new to doing that work, so we're excited to get that going. And it will be developed at a feasibility level of detail and go through the standard Corps feasibility process. Lastly, recommendations for future feasibility studies and future phases of work may come out of this effort, and that is the intent. They will be described at a high level of detail and be based on the screening and planning process that we undertake through these two different approaches. So lastly, the comprehensive study milestone dates. We just finished the alternative milestones meeting, and through that process, we were able to get a scope, schedule, and budget to complete this effort. It is going to be a bit of a long effort. It's a 5-year anticipated effort. You can see those dates here. The next big item is the vertical team alignment memo, which is set for June 10th. That is where we will get vertical team alignment that the scope, schedule, and budget is correct, and we will start earnestly on the study. Tentatively selected plan milestone is in December, and then a final chief's report is not anticipated until March of 2029. So that's kind of a overview and update of those planning processes, and ending with the current big effort with the comprehensive study. Lastly, for more information, there are 2 websites, one for the Yolo Bypass Cash Loop Partnership that Ruth Darling explained, and then there's also a core website for the comprehensive study that they have started populating with data and information. Any questions?
At this point, I see no one from the board punching in. Is there any member of the public that has any questions? Seeing none, is that the end of the presentation? Yes. Well, Melanie, Ruth, and Mary, thank you very much for a very thorough presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we're going to recess into closed session. All right, come back to order. Would the clerk please call the roll to reestablish quorum?
Thank you. Director Desmond? Here. Director Frost? Sorry, my pen ran out. Director Hume?
Here.
Chairman Kennedy?
Here.
Director Cerna? Here. Director Jennings? Here. Director Kaplan? Director Talamentes? Director Holloway? Director Johns? Here. Director Aptis? Director Reeder? Director Conant? We have a 9-member quorum.
Thank you very much. Council, is there anything to report out of closed session?
Nothing to report at this time.
That takes us to our consent items.
And 2 through 6 are in order.
Are there any questions of the board? Is there any member of the public? Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second by Director Jennings and a second by Director Hume. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Next item, please.
Executive Director's report for May 16th.
Good afternoon. I have a real short one for us today. I did want to make you aware on April 23rd, the Corps of Engineers and Congressman Matsui held a showcase. The purpose was to have the media and other officials hear about all the construction going on up at Folsom, at Natomas, on American River Common Features 2016, West Sacramento, and then also on the Yolo Bypass study. On the far right over here, that's Assistant Secretary of the Army, Michael Connor. In the middle here, that is the Director of Department of Water Resources, Carla Nemeth. And then, of course, Congressman Matsui is speaking over there. They did take an opportunity to do a ceremonial groundbreaking, even though all the projects are well under construction. So it was a photo op. Changing gears a little bit, I did get a recent photos from the core aerial. This is looking down on the Sacramento Weir and bypass. Right along here is the Weir alignment with where the Weir Bridge will be. Along here is the alignment of footprint for the new fish passage, and then this is just looking up at the footprint of the fish passage. So a lot of work's going on out there, and pretty soon everything will be coming up out of the ground. Moving up to Folsom, this is the flood wall. That's the raise up at Dike 1, and then just another angle on that. So that's really all I had right now, and see if there's any questions.
Any questions from the board? Seeing none, any members of the public? Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Next item.
Separate matters, item 8 is a public hearing, resolution of necessity number 2024042, continued from the January 18th meeting regarding APN 35271014, property at 7521 Natomas Road, and the property owner is George L. Burnsett Jr. and Maria C. Burnsett.
Mr. DeGroat, can you just go right to the staff recommendation, please?
Yes, good afternoon, directors. Staff recommends this fee continue to the August board meeting.
Okay, Chair will make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you very much. Next item.
Information presenting the fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget.
Good afternoon, board members. Jason Campbell, Deputy Executive Director. I'll wait for the presentation. Here we go. So once again, we're at that time of year where it's time for us to go through the process of preparing our budget and sharing it with you all. And of course, here in May, we do an informational item so that you can see and hopefully inform us if there are any changes that you'd like us to make as we move into the June period of the public hearing for the final budget. So as mentioned, the Safca goes through an accelerated process of doing budget as allowed in the government code. So what we do is we inform you this month, and next month we bring it back. And in the meantime, if there are any changes, we would need to post those on by May 30th. So here we are today after meeting with the Finance Committee on the 8th, addressing the budget to the entire board. And then, of course, we will be publishing our next notice for the public hearing and then budget hearing on June 20th. Fortunately, since the May 8th meeting with the Finance Committee, as mentioned, there was the anticipation that money may be coming from the state, and fortunately, we received $31.8 million this week. So we have made adjustments since the Finance Committee to address the receipt of those funds, and we have changed the recommended operating transfers as well as some other lines in order to incorporate that.
And that is actually a $1.4 million increase than your estimate.
It's really very close, yes.
Director Kaplan.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So our budget is based on a number of assumptions, including making sure that our priorities don't change, and we are continuing to move our projects as scheduled. And of course, we are constantly in line with our ULOP and NFIP objectives to make sure that we are taking care of our constituents. Also, state revenues come in as planned, and our cost share agreements are adhered to. We anticipate that market trends are a little bit different on the development impact fee, so the budget reflects that. And then also stable assessment revenues are anticipated as usual. This is the breakdown of our appropriations for the project sources. As you can see, we have funds coming from current year as fund balance in the tune of $35 million. We have a total revenue anticipated next year just over $62 million, and then total reserve release from other funds of $32.2 million. Our primary sources, our primary uses of funds, of course, is for our projects and acquisitions and work necessary to deliver those projects with our project partners. That covers over 82% of our overall budget. We have salaries and benefits, a measly 3%. I like to share that every time. And then, of course, we have services and supplies that are sifted through the different funds, and we'll get to those in just a few minutes. And I apologize, the contingency is 3%. It got cut off on the slide. So again, we have 4 funds that we operate with. The O&M Assessment District acts as our general fund. The other funds provide sources for project efforts, as well as it's a fee collection and pass-throughs for some of our various bond issuances. So again, 325F, the Development Impact Fee Fund, that's our fee collection fund, and then Natomas Basin and CC82, both are project funds for specific areas. Jumping forward, this is the breakdown of our accountings for each of the line items in summary of all 4 funds. And you can see that the balance between the appropriations for expenditures and also the financing are in balance. I can go through those in detail if you'd like, but they're going to be covered again here on the next slides. So again, our O&M budget broken down. You can see salaries and benefits again, as well as services and supplies are the main items there. The negative number there for intra-fund cost recovery is for staff time charged to projects from the other funds. And then the financing, you can see there are some reserves that are being pulled out, and also prior year fund balance, and then we anticipate $6.4 million in assessment revenue. As required by government code, we have our positions, salaries, and full-time allocations for our positions. We have 18 full-time employees, 1 half-time retired annuitant. No changes this current year are proposed. And project expenses, again, we see that the lion's share of all of our efforts are related to the Corps of Engineers and state partnership projects. American River Common Features Natomas is the largest expenditure in the coming year, as anticipated, at just over $38 million. Walking through the budgets very quickly for projects starting upriver, our goal is 500 a year. We have our FERO projects and discussions taking place for those upstream reservoirs and other activities. We anticipate spending just over $1.3 million to keep those studies going and keep things moving. Up at Folsom Dam, we have a number of activities. Unfortunately, some of those are fully funded by the Corps, but we still do have expenditures estimated just under $1 million this coming year. Common Features 2016, again, one of our large projects, $14.1 million, lots of activity. Fortunately, again, we are in a very good situation as regards to cost share and efforts that we've done in the past that are bringing down the pay going forward. And then our Natomas project, the major expenditure of the year, $38.2 million anticipated. We are basically working on, I think, every single reach that's on that map in some way, shape, or form. So lots of activity in Natomas as usual. And again, you've seen the estimate of this before, and also you just received some Yellow study and Yellow bypass efforts, and we are continuing to pay our part as that partnership moves forward. So once again, these are the fund summaries for each individual fund. We are seeing that just under $20 million are associated with the development impact fee, $40.5 million from Natomas. That is where we parked a bunch of those dollars from the state, and we are transferring those from the Natomas into CC82, pardon me. And that $40 million operating transfer represents what our normal operation is, just on a little higher scale now. And then again, we have our CC82 and the basic line items for each one of those. And again, you can see those operating transfers, the infrastructure components, as well as the other expenditures for services and supplies and other things supporting our projects. This is just another slice at how those projects are funded, breaks it down by fund and what the project activities are and their associated numbers. And at this point, again, no action is required. If there are questions or comments that are going to inform the budget going forward for our May 30 post, then we'd love to have those comments and questions from you now, or you can let us know next week too.
Director Hume.
Thank you, Chair. Quick question on the appropriations and financing breakdowns.
on every one of them in varying fashions. A lot of the financing was reserves or prior year fund balance. That's obviously not a go-forward sustainable way to meet your obligations. So how do we replenish those and/or account for the fact that they will be going away?
So those fund balances that you see, of course, we have to try and plan what the Corps is estimating that they're going to spend in the following year, as well as the revenues that we are going to receive from the state. Neither of those are very consistent or easy to plan, so we tend to have to be a little heavy on our appropriations each year to make sure that we have the proper appropriations for what could be coming. So that fund balance piece reflects that. In addition, all of the reserves and other components that you see those reserves coming in from others, it's either reserves that we have because we've collected assessments and we're using bond funds, or it's actually still bond proceeds that are coming forward. As the projects get more mature, we start to get closer to being at a pay-go situation. And with that state funding, that still is the case. The $31.8 million helps us try to get closer to that pay-go. Ultimately, there may be a time in the future where, depending on how long these projects go, that we may need to go ahead and do some refinancing of one of the bond funds or other new money types of financing packages. We're not there yet, but what you're seeing is that we, in the past, have had pretty significant numbers of bond proceeds that were still in the bank, and we're using those appropriately as we move forward.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Kaplan.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions that I had asked earlier. And you kind of touched on it on Director Humes, but can you describe some of the issues with the state reimbursement and the lag timeline and why the budget is sometimes showing transfers in and out?
Yes. So when it comes to the state revenues, we are receiving those revenues as reimbursements. We take the initiative to move forward with all of our real estate transactions and a number of consultant support contracts to assist the projects to move forward. The process of seeking that reimbursement is sometimes very lengthy. So we have seen floating numbers of reimbursements in backlog from the state from a range of $15 to $40 million, as you can see. So that duration really does float around, and sometimes it could take as much as 2 years to see some of those come back through. As far as the reserves, we have healthy reserves in several of our budgets or several of our funds, and you don't necessarily see them in the budget cycle, but on the finance side, when you see our financials, those reserves are identified, and we're just transferring those in as needed.
So do you think with the state heading into a deficit, are we going to see the lag time expand? Just because as you set up the budget, I think, the timing of knowing when we may have to anticipate state funding come in may change.
You're absolutely right, and that's why we're very ecstatic that we've received the funds that we did this week. Going forward, we are going to continue to provide the reimbursement receipts on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, whatever is appropriate, based on the agreement. But also, yes, with those, it's always a gamble, and that's, I hate to say that, but that's the truth. It's always a gamble as to expecting those revenues to come in, and if your financing is based on those revenues coming in, you can find yourself in a bind. So I think that going into this tough state budget, that going forward, we're going to be a little bit more conservative than we've already been, and our future budgets after 25 will be representing that to you.
Perfect, thank you. We know retirement costs are going up significantly. What is the status of funding your retirement?
So our retirement through CalPERS is obviously fully funded. Our long-term post-retirement benefits, as well as our long-term funding for retirement, is 100%. And actually, with our 115 trust through PARS, we are actually fully funded on the retirement side. And if we're not, we will be in the very near future. So we don't have those unfunded liabilities that others do have.
And then last question, we're seeing go throughout different government entities and agencies, significant increase in IT costs for protection to make sure that systems are not hacked. What are we seeing for Safca? Are those costs increasing? Are additional firewalls being needed?
So fortunately, we have agreements with the county and the county's IT folks. So we haven't necessarily seen those pass-throughs if there are there, but as a normal budget cycle, we do see increases, but we're not seeing anything that's unacceptable.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, and if county staff's listening, make note of that.
Note to self, Bill Safca for cybersecurity.
Any other questions? Anyone, member of the public, like to address the board? No, this is an information item. Thank you, and I will say thank you to the Finance Committee, Director Kaplan in particular, who asked some very poignant questions during our meeting. And I also want to thank you, Jeremy, and your staff. It bears repeating from last year that, years ago, the budget was extremely difficult to understand. You have made it so that it's actually very easy to understand, but still provides the same amount of information. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. With that, we do have one issue, and that's our next meeting is June 20th, Mr. Johnson. I don't know. I haven't polled, but you might have trouble with the board as we'll be on break. I know you're going to have trouble with me. And the council might be in the same boat. I don't know, but we sometimes have similar schedules, so we'll have to talk before that, okay? I don't think we want all alternates up here when we're approving the budget. So, all right. Anything else? We have no business. We're adjourned. Thank you.